Good afternoon. It's now 12:07 on Tuesday, November 24th. We are lighting the candle, World That Works, and we're talking. We're just people talking. We love shooting holes in the sky, and the whole idea here is to give access. We get it during these conversations, which is why we come back week after week after week. And we want you to get it too. And we also want to hear what you have to say about what you think about our conversation and what you think is missing, what you would add, what you agree with and disagree with. I really want to hear comments from folks out there and how this becomes this conversation that we're having, which is totally unintentional, other than the fact we are here speaking, and the whole hoagie roll, if you will, is empowerment. What makes people's lives more enjoyable? What allows you and I to get into action where we feel like we're stuck, like maybe we don't want to get out of bed in the morning ever, and now all of a sudden we're out performing very powerfully in the world and making things happen and really, as Ken likes to say, experiencing the moment of joy. So I'm Bill Carell. Thank you again for tuning in with us. This is the part B of our series today. And also with me are Ken Caputo and my dear friend Lisa Sheehan. Ken is a dear friend as well. So we're here kind of engaging in conversation that started off with speaking of being grateful, thankful, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we've gotten into what I think is kind of an amazing segue that really we've got some more work to do here to flesh this out. We were speaking, before we completed the last half hour, and we were talking about how language gives rise to different behaviors and experiences in terms of how to experience the world. And if you don't mind, Ken, I'm going to reference an exercise that John, your mentor, does with peripheral vision, and this whole notion of staring straight ahead and now being 100% mindful of what's happening all the way out at your right hand periphery, and then all the way out at your left hand periphery. Give it a minute, let it tune in, let things distinguish themselves, see the objects in their completeness, see them from the front, the back, and the sides, see them from the top, see them from the bottom. And as you're doing this, then we do this really cool thing, like now give 20% attention to your right-hand side and 80% to your left-hand side. And all of this is really, at the beginning, a lot like one of those Chinese, finger deals. The harder you pull and try to make it happen, the less it actually occurs that way. And for me, it all shifted, and suddenly I could not only experience it, and I could vividly see what is out at this periphery and out at this periphery. And the fun part of it is it took a little bit of intentionality and work. Ken, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a tool. It's like a navigational tool, and he calls it focuses for function, peripheral is for peace. And the idea is when you need to be dialed in, you reduce, you focus in on whatever it is that a person, this conversation. But when that view needs to be expanded, that's when you can open your focus out, and it's a very interesting thing. It's a cool thing to try. Like if you're feeling like anxious, or someone's bringing a lot of energy at you that's overwhelming you, bringing your perspective out. And you can do it visually. You can also do it audibly or kinesthetically. So audibly, you just start listening for the furthest sound that you can hear. So it might be a fan blowing or a car driving outside, and you're still hearing what's happening in front of you, but it's like being up on that plane we're talking about. You just expanded your perspective, which makes you bigger than the problem, is kind of what you're working towards. And kinesthetically, it's like right now, just feeling the chair that you're sitting on, the weight of it, feeling the weight of your feet pressing into the ground. All of a sudden, it opens your awareness. So, but then you can't just float there all the time. Sometimes you actually have to get stuff done. So you got to bring your focus in, let some of those things go, so you can dial in. So that's the term he uses. Focus is for function, peripheral is for peace.
Yeah. So we were talking in the last half hour about effortless,
mindfulness.
Well, or mindlessness, whichever seems to work too. But what we were talking about was creating, a sensual five sense experience and relationship with the cloud, so such that you could experience being up above it, below it, outside it, inside, all of those things, and for no other reason than just the play, the play of the situation, to actually experience that. And that made me recall that exercise that we did with John now, which seems like about 2 years ago. The interesting part of the whole conversation today is, if you're not feeling grateful, who do you have to thank for that? If you are feeling grateful, who do you have to thank for that? Anything in that question?
I missed part of the question because my internet went a little lulu there.
So I'll repeat what I said, and you can either pick it up and throw it back or not. I said, so with regard to gratefulness, if you are grateful, who do you have to thank for that? If you're not grateful, who do you have to thank for that?
I'm just thinking it's me, myself, and I. Those three characters. Yeah, I'm responsible for how I feel in any given moment. So to put that on anyone else is just unrealistic, although easy to do.
So if I go a step further, Lisa, is there such a thing as being grateful or not being grateful? Or is it a choice you made in a moment to experience life from there?
I think gratitude exists in me, and I even try to keep a gratitude journal at night, so to feel it, express it. But yeah, I can't imagine saying that gratitude, or I cannot feel grateful or ungrateful. I'm sure human emotions exist, so we create them. But that's my responsibility to feel it or not feel it.
If I can beg the question one more step, at what age did you distinguish being grateful? At what point did that become a conversational tool to describe how you were feeling in a circumstance?
I think I tend to go back to when I was 10 years old. And because I bring it up so much, climbing a tree with a little bag of potato chips and sitting at the fork of a tree, and then putting the bag of potato chips on there and just admiring the world. And I don't even think I had language for it yet, but I'm pretty sure that was my experience of gratitude for the world I lived in. And I think it started, at least I think that's my best experience of it, and when it's out in nature as opposed to being humanly influenced. Because I think that's where your ego comes into play and starts making it about how people, your perception of what people think of you instead of how you feel about yourself, kind of thing. So I like my tree and talking to a higher being.
I like it. And I also appreciate that you just distinguished that this terminology exists in language only. There isn't any actual being grateful or being ungrateful. Around the world, it's probably languaged thousands of different ways and thousands of different words. However, it's highly descriptive, once said, of a state that you can find yourself in. And that's really powerful, I say, Ken, you look like you've got something on your mind.
Yeah, well, this just feels like another view thing. I think the potential to recognize and experience gratitude is always there. So now what allowed you to become aware of that potential so that you could recognize it. So like, for example, snow exists, right? We all agree. But if you live someplace where there was never snow and no one ever told you what snow was, you never saw it on television or anything, you would have no knowledge that snow exists until you somehow experienced or saw snow. So, so I think, at some point, we recognize this as being something, a feeling we have, it's shared with us, it's explained to us, and then we have some kind of relationship with it, usually by having had the absence of something and then the presence of something. So like, I didn't have a dad when I was young, and then my mom remarried and I had a dad. So I had a tremendous amount of gratitude for the fact that I had a dad where, and that probably was a different experience for me than someone who just always had a dad, so, so there's all those kinds of things that, I mean, it's really, it just comes back to view, and then the other thing that's interesting is I think your relationship with the mirror and the window would probably determine how you recognize gratitude, so, and that whole thing is about, when do you look in the mirror and when do you look out the window? And, I think I've talked about before, they did the CEO thing. You got some CEOs, when things go right, they look in the mirror and pat themselves on the back. And when things go wrong, they look out the mirror, out the window and point to circumstances. Others, it's the opposite. When things go wrong, they look to themselves. When things go right, they congratulate the people around them that helped to make it happen. So gratitude would definitely fall into that category. When do you look where, and how have you learned to recognize it? But I think it's always there. The potential for it's always there.
Well, what's interesting is, and what I'd just like to report back to you, one of my favorite sayings that I picked up from some guys that I considered and gals that I considered through my career to be really great leaders was, if anything goes right, you give the credit away. And if anything goes wrong, you take credit for that and be the one who's responsible for putting in what's missing or correcting the situation or leading people in a different way than you have before. So that the leader is always malleable. The leader is always in a position of change and growth. And in that change and growth is visible to the folks around them. There's a team that gets created that nobody has to have a definite role to play other than their technical roles. It's not like leaders get created by followers and followers create great leaders, okay? And the other part of it is that's just talk. That's conversational until it means something to you in particular, until it presences something inside of you that you go, yeah, I can see that. I get that. That makes all the sense to me in the world. And as we were talking about before, if you are experiencing something and you are awake enough to know that the ultimate person in your universe who is linked with the perfection of outcomes is yourself, the one that you are developing and growing and creating as something that is powerful in the world, is a I think that's the right word to use, is that it is a being of power. It's a person of influence and a person of great humility and responsibility. So that in every single moment, if you are focused on what seems to work, it's almost never a personal thing. It's almost always a team or a community or a cultural outcome. Does that make any sense? Hmm. If life is, a series of self-help books that 1 billion people go through and all they did was improve themselves, what do we end up with?
An improved world.
Yeah.
So you get 1 billion people that are very self-satisfied with all the work they've done over a lifetime. Now, that's from the skin in, if you're looking at self-help and self-development without having the skin out approach to it, like what's happening out there, and I bring that back to what you were saying about the mirror and the window, Ken. If you don't have both of them distinguished as separate things to you, you can't tell them apart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I say when leadership starts to occur is when you start to see that there is a window and a mirror, and now you start playing with those two constructs.
It's funny when you're talking about leadership. Like, I won't hire someone if they have a certain type of relationship with I and we. So, so even like in an interview, and then in their first 90 days, if it's, I did that really well, I made that happen, I can't believe how good that turned out, and then it's, we need to fix this, we have a problem. That's not someone who's staying with me. But if it's like, look, I did something wrong, I screwed up, I misunderstood, there's that sense of personal responsibility. And it's like, oh my God, we did that amazing. We blah, blah, so it's just really just to learn to listen for when they apply those two things. And that tells me a lot about, and it's really just because we're clear, like you said, on the culture that we want to create. So if you know to listen to that, there's clues that can be given to you. But it's funny, you said the thing about, there's a whole thing, if we solve all of our problems to the benefit of others, what would be denied us in this lifetime? And that's why I named my blog Spilling Over.
Yeah.
The whole idea was, fill yourself with your unique value, your unique, until it just, you have so much of it, it just falls out of you, it spills out of you. Now you're not depleting yourself. The rest of us can just enjoy the abundance you've created within yourself, So, and that's all those crazy posts I've been doing. That's what it's writing towards. It's just, that idea. I think it'd be talk about an empowered world.
Well,
that sounds pretty cool.
The whole notion in the 1970s, do you remember the book, Net Zero Sum Game, where there always had to be winners and losers, and they were speaking specifically about investing. Mm-hmm. That in order for winners to be created, somebody else had to give up their dough. Okay, mm-hmm. And then there was this whole notion when Covey and others started talking in terms of synergy and starting to talk about what's 2 + 2 equal. Well, the net zero sum game guy is going to tell you it's whatever whatever you tell me you want it to be, and the other guy says I don't know, but it's got to be at least 9 or 20, right? Mm-hmm. 2 + 2 of two people that are wide open in every circumstance. When you declare a victory, and the team hasn't sat down and said, what did we do really, really well that we can keep and take forward? And where did we leave ourselves, even just a skosh of room, for Kaizen, for improvement on the next go around? And those conversations are completely empowering, as opposed to after everything is done, going and find out who did something wrong and correcting that person. The environment of bring us the best that you've got all the time, and we'll meet energy with energy. We'll be right there with you. You fall down, we're going to pick you back up, because the team is not as strong without you as it is with you at 100%. So in terms of looking at what you just said, the whole I was doing really great and then you showed up for work, model. But this goes back to a philosophical thing, and I can't tell you for sure where I read it or who said it, but it might have been Deepak. But it had to do with, why on earth would I have anything less than the best wife ever? And why on earth would I have anything less than the best teammates ever? And why on earth would I have anything less than the best community ever? And then it keeps expanding and expanding and expanding to the point where the anticipation of getting out of bed every morning to go play with the best ever for the best day ever, if I can mix those two, that really starts to get you to a place where I can get that it's perfect, and I can get that sometimes it doesn't seem like it works. However, how long do I want to be talking about it's not working, and how long do I want to be, stopped there before I'm back engaged and fully in action about what will work? that a conversation you hear much going on out there right at the moment?
Well, that's the
Depends
trouble.
on who you're
I
talking
work
to.
in corporate so much that the philosophy I've heard there is one I hear a lot outside is it's better to beg forgiveness than ask permission, and that's just a horrible philosophy. It doesn't bode to any sort of perfect at all. So, and I think that's why corporate work has become so grating against so many people, myself included.
Well, you know what happens when a capitalist stops being a true capitalist and they start being a marketer or a marketeer? They take a really great idea and they reduce it to its lowest level of corruptness, and then they try to whip it on everybody in their business. I can remember I went to work for a laser company, I don't know, 40 years ago or maybe 35 years ago. And they had this thing called customer care. And customer care, had this big picture of a lion, customer is king, this, that, and the other thing. And I put my hand in the air because I said, I came from a little bit, different background. Is there room for us to expand that all of us, every last one of us, create the whole system and the whole team, and that the customer relationship is not something that you trot out of a closet when you're dealing with clients? You got to be that way all the time with everyone that you're working with, vendors, anyone who is contributing to the solutions for the business. And they said, how do we do that? All we know how to do is to kiss the government's ass and get the next contract. So, I mean, what they were saying was, we have to spend all of our energy, making sure that our clients are happy. Well, yeah, we get that. But why do you put out, 65 lasers that have to be recalled within the first 90 days so that you could make quarterly numbers? And you knew that you were going to have to recall those lasers within the first 90 days. So what I'm saying to you is that not all corporations deal that way. But if you start looking at the ones who want to persist and who want to, live through time and want to continuously be profitable quarter over quarter, year over year, they're not always employing, the essential philosophies that they were able to start building their culture with. Somewhere along the way, it seems to get washed away, and now it's not necessarily that. I don't know. I could use Apple Computer as an example. Do you think that Steve Jobs was ever hoping that his devices could be used to manipulate billions of people? I don't think that's where he was coming from.
No, he was coming from, he said he wanted to put a dent in the universe. He wanted to put a computer in every home, So, and of course, you don't know what the second, third, fourth, fifth order consequences are going to be, because once you put a powerful tool in people's hands, you can't always determine what they're going to do with it,
Yes.
So, but what's interesting, and this, I get real excited about this because, like business culture, that's like just such a fascinating thing to me. And I think a lot of times what you're seeing is an unquestioned assumption that everybody is aligned with achieving the same result. So, and that's very rarely the case. And in fact, leadership can often do a poor time of communicating to everyone involved what that result is. So whenever we have a disconnect in any of the businesses that I've been involved with, when you sense the disconnect, someone says, what is the result we're trying to produce?
Yes.
So like, stop, let's get clear. And 90% of the time, someone doesn't know, or they're working towards two different results. And if you just stop and ask the question, now you can work through the process of getting aligned. Tony Hsieh talked about it in Delivering Happiness, the book you wrote about Zappos. And he said he went to a rave, and I think I've talked about this before, and he's hundreds of people all facing the DJ, facing the same way, listening to the same beat, and they're all moving unique to them, they're all having their experience, but they all had a focal point and they all knew what it was. And he said it was powerful and fascinating. And that's how he built, basically a top 10 work environment for years and years, was just helping everyone be clear on what the results. So like for them, their customer support center, there's no time limits. Like, and if you call up the Zappos used to be able to and ask them where the closest place to you to order a pizza is, they'll do it. They'll tell you, they'll stay on the phone with you for an hour, So all of those people were very clear on what the result was, which allowed them to align and work towards it. And if they didn't agree with it, they would actually pay you $5,000 to not come to work for the company. You go through executive training. And if you just said and they would say, well, we'd rather pay you to not work here than have someone come to work here who isn't aligned with our culture, our community, our purpose, our vision.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
My dad often tells the story of, I remember growing up, a failing company owner decided to hire a consultant. The consultant comes in and just interviews all the employees and says, well, actually, he interviews the man. He says, well, what do you expect from the company? And he tells them what he really expects from the company. And then he goes back and tells all the employees, and they improve immensely.
Yeah.
And so the owner says, what did you do? And he goes, well, I told them what you want. He goes, that's cheating.
No, there's been big studies done about that. And, and often, and having been in the CEO position, if I make an assumption that everybody knows even what our priorities are, they usually don't. And we have 3 priorities, for Quester's Way, and it's amazing how long it takes for people to really internalize that, to where if I ask them, they'll repeat them back. And there are 8 qualities that we expect in someone that's going to join the team. And it takes a while for them to really be able to have that internalized so they understand, so it's not putting it on a memo or sticking it on a wall on a poster. That's not enough. It's, it takes time and effort and repetition and a lot of focus from everyone. So it makes perfect sense why it would fall apart so easily. It
requires one other really majorly important thing, and that is that you know where you're going and what you want.
Yeah.
As a leader, and it's a sign of weak leadership if you walk through an organization and you find out of 5 people, 3 of them that can't tell you, what the deal is. So the whole notion of being a fear-based manager, a carrot and stick type of a manager, where you have competing ideas, you're inviting people to disagree with each other on a daily basis, and the strongest argument will be the best way forward. Why is that so? Because it's the one that always wins. So what that says about the culture is it's less important for management and for the senior team to say exactly what they want to accomplish right this minute and own it. Taking ownership for something that ultimately doesn't succeed can be very dangerous for C-level people. So where I've seen this whole idea of, let's get some turmoil going here. Let's be disruptors. Let's see which idea survives. That whole thing allows for people to work inside of an environment where they really have no clue what's expected of them on a daily basis. And you ask them what your job description says, it has nothing to do with what I actually do. My job on a daily basis is to put fires out and keep things from getting worse than they were yesterday. Sound familiar? If you work inside organizations, and a lot of that has to do with, we did a poor job for a lot of years of giving, the Peter principle, where someone gets hired to their highest level of incompetence. And, they're almost, the only way this can end for you is that you get into a job that you can't possibly do. Then we replace you with somebody else in a year or 2. Very ineffective.
Can I share some hard won from many mistakes over many years? If you're, for anyone out there, if you're the visionary and you have a very clear vision for where you want your business, your company to go, that is useless to the degree that you're capable of clearly sharing that with everyone around you.
Yes.
And I fell into that trap. It was so clear to me, and I was making assumptions that everyone else would get it and feel the same and understand it. And, and if they don't, they can't. It's your vision. No one sees what you see ever, so it takes a tremendous amount of effort. And I'd hear it from working with different business people. It's like, why don't they just do it? Why don't they just, do what I tell them to do? And that's usually an indication they're not, because they don't understand. It's clear in your mind, but you haven't made it clear in theirs, So I see it with teachers a lot too. They get frustrated with students not understanding, and they're forgetting to look at themselves through that person's eyes. So, so especially if you've got more of a disruptive vision where you're trying to do something that they can't reference against something else,
Right.
You have to do a lot of work on communicating that, and then recognizing whether or not they're actually hearing it or just nodding their head because you're their boss, because they'll do that too, and not in a bad way, just being respectful. Sure. So, if everyone's agreeing with you, that's another thing that should make you nervous.
Yeah, let's get the best people we possibly can and then not listen to them,
Yeah.
And then also not provide them a safe place to ask questions.
Yeah, you have to be a powerful deliverer of the message. Then you have to be very skillful at recognizing how or if they're receiving that message. And then you have to be willing to do the deep work of reaching mutual understanding, where everybody agrees that they're understanding the same thing, and then you got to repeat it over and over again forever. It never stops. So
this actually happens in all sorts of organizations, by the way. It's usually
absolutely.
There are 2 competing or 3 competing goals within every organization. And if those 3 things can't be combined into one goal, what you're going to have is a height of inefficiency, a lot of people that are very upset, a lot of people who never, get recognized for doing a great job because there's no possible way to see the great job that's being done. So I don't know, that has nothing to do with creating anything other than referring to some experiences in the past. But if you see that where you are now, be courageous, put your hand in the air and say, why don't we talk for a minute? Let's create something different. We do it first in language, and then we do it with our feet and our hands. So,
yep.
Lisa, did you have anything else that you want to say before we sign off on this segment?
Well, I was just going to say that ultimately it boils down to our basic conversations with each other, which goes back to our initial premise for this whole show. Was if people don't understand what you feel or how you think, then try to make attempts to articulate yourself to the point, and then have it come back at you. See, is this what you understood? Is that what I said? That, because it starts with your own conversations. If you can't have them in, I'm sure people could probably more comfortable having them in work situations, but personal is even more important. So, because I know I have that issue. I just think everybody understands, is in my head and can understand everything I'm saying or thinking, and it's not true. Nobody can know what you feel like, but you have to express it.
Yep. So to summarize today's sort of hour, take credit for what doesn't work, give credit away for what does work, and every situation is perfect. So last call. Lisa, what are you most grateful for now? What is Thanksgiving going to be for you? What are you most grateful for?
That's a good question. I think I'm most grateful for my family. Plain and simple.
Excellent. Ken?
I'm grateful for just sharing this journey with all the other humans who are here on the planet right now at this time. It's just I wouldn't want to be anywhere else until I am.
I am completely grateful for the freedom to have this sort of conversation every single week, for no other reason than perhaps it will create some empowerment for folks. And at the same time, I always leave feeling empowered. But the thing I'm most grateful for this Thanksgiving holiday, above and beyond family, is I've got my first homemade pecan pie in at least 18 to 20 years, and my wife made a test one over the weekend. It was fabulous. So we're making the real deal for where we're going on Thursday for Thanksgiving. Oh, you're making that tomorrow? Or yeah, probably tomorrow. Anyway. Well, guys, that's another episode of Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, and I really appreciate spending this time with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.